Hello everyone, today we will review Dracula Untold. Now I'd never seen this movie, and it came out 6 years ago, but and I don't know why I'd never reviewed it yet. Maybe I was just hoping to do a review of it sooner, I do believe. Probably I was hoping to do a review of it much sooner than 2020, but we are doing it this year because this year has just been a good year to get back into the YouTube scene. And, I've uploaded several other videos, but yeah, it's been a good year for that. Anyhow, this story is narrated narrated by the son of Vlad the Impaler. And if you don't know who Vlad the Impaler is, definitely go look that up. He was a leader who killed, I don't know, probably hundreds of thousands of people by the end of his reign, I do believe. It was a massive number anyway, as to who he had killed by the end of his reign, yeah. So this story is about Vlad the Impaler and his enemy, the Turks. Basically, he has given up his old life as Vlad the Impaler, and he's just trying to create peace between the two worlds, but unfortunately, the Turks don't want that. They want to tarnish their deal, and they ask for children, which is one of the old ways of the Turks, to basically raise children to become warriors, fearless of anything. And Vlad the Impaler was one of those children warriors who was raised up from a young age, and he became one of the fiercer ones, as well as one of the men he used to call brother in the battlefield, who is now the leader of the Turks, who wants to go back to the old ways. But Vlad doesn't want that. He wants to keep the peace. Unfortunately, he's not able to do so, because the leader of the Turks asks for his son, and he doesn't want to give his son up, so he kills some of the Turks in order to keep his son safe, and then makes a deal with the vampire up on, I believe it was Broken Tooth Mountain in this movie, that's what it's called. He makes a deal with him to become a vampire himself for 5 days, and he only has to resist thirst for human blood, and then he'll go back to his normal mortal self. Unfortunately, that's not what happens. The Turks end up coming after him, and despite his greatest efforts, his wife ends up dying, and he has to drink her blood on the 5th day. So then he goes he ends up becoming a vampire full time, basically, throughout the ages. But the very end battle scene is pretty crazy, because he basically can control the bats. I believe he has some sort of like echolocation power, so he's able to control the bats through his through that method, and he just like wipes out most of the Turkish army, most of the Turks in this little, like, I guess kind of like like the Grand Canyon. What would you call the, not tunnels, but God, I can't think of the right word. Trails through caves, I guess, maybe? I'm not really sure the exact terminology there, but anyhow, they're basically trapped between these two rock walls, and he just kind of like takes out most of the army, but then some of the Turks are able to infiltrate the castle, and his wife falls to her death, and then he drinks her blood, and then he becomes a full-time vampire, and goes back into his own castle, which is the castle of Dracula, which is what he is known as to most people by this time. He is Dracula now, even though he doesn't say it to the very end of the movie. So he goes back in to his own castle and creates his own army, because if they drink his blood, they will become vampires too, and basically loyal to him. And one of the major things was once he drank his wife's blood, the vampire that was in the castle that had been condemned there could finally be set free to go about his own life and basically wreak havoc on the person that put him there. So that was probably one of the cooler scenes in the movie, because the vampire that basically was controlling Vlad in a certain way was now free to do whatever he wanted to. So yeah, he goes back with his army of vampires and just wipes out the last of the Turk army, including the leader. And then at the very end, all the vampires decide to turn on him, even though he gave them this power. So he just says to his wife, "Our son is finally safe," when the sky opens up, because it was darkness due to the fact that he had gained this power. It was just pure darkness, that entire scene. And then all the vampires are vanquished, basically because he's completed his mission, I guess. So his son is now named Prince. One of the guys in the movie, I would say it's basically like his Igor in a type of way, because he kind of follows him throughout the movie, cuts his hand at the end and makes Vlad drink his blood, so Vlad comes back to life. And then obviously he's an immortal being now, so he goes throughout the ages, and then it shows him way in the future, like present day, I'm assuming. And he sees this woman, and they kind of walk off into the sunset type thing. But then all of a sudden you see these fingernails clicking on the table, and you know that it's the vampire that was released from the caves way back in the day following him. And then he says, "Let the games begin." So I'm not really sure what that means exactly, but I guess if there's ever a sequel to this movie, we might find out, because it's been 6 years and there's been no talks of a sequel. But unfortunately, that was a big cliffhanger. So maybe, I'm not sure how much this movie made in theaters. Maybe it kind of flopped, and that's why there was never a sequel to it, but I enjoyed the film. What other scenes could I talk about here? I think that might be it. I think I've probably touched on mostly everything. Yeah, I would say the other scene that was actually really good was the scene where he first gets his powers, and he kind of like takes on the whole army by himself, and basically asks his people not to ask what happened out in the battlefield, but to just trust him. And then when, I guess it was a priest or something, finds out that he is this creature, they turn on him and try to kill him, which is kind of ironic, because they do that, I guess, more throughout the movie, but in the end it's his son that they want to kill instead. So that was kind of, yeah. His people weren't very loyal to him, I guess you could say, even though he gave them freedom and then gave them the power to be free again at the end of the movie. They could have just went on their way and did whatever they wanted to. But, of course, I guess that's not the way things worked back then. I guess it was much easier to betray your fellow man. So they kind of did that in more than one way, and yeah, it was kind of sad to see him have to give up his son at the end due to the fact that his son wouldn't be safe unless he had changed him. I wish he kind of had, because then they could have kind of ruled as vampires and nobody would have ever been able to touch them, but they didn't do that for this movie. They made it a little bit more sad at the end, but that's okay. That was just their way of writing it. I guess I would have written it a little bit differently if I'd done it myself, but anyhow. But yeah, I would say this movie was definitely an 8 out of 10. I'm giving it an 8 because it did take some time for it to pick up, but once it did, it was nothing but nonstop action, I would say, for the most part. And the storyline definitely got better as, obviously, the battle scenes and things started to commence. So I think that's it. I think that's all I have to say about this film. Definitely go see this one. I highly recommend it. And maybe we'll get a sequel to it. I don't know. I would like to see a sequel to it, even if it's not all the same actors. I know that sometimes doesn't make for the best films or sequels, but hey, as long as they can get the guy who played Dracula in it, I would. And obviously, the guy who played the vampire in the cave that first gave him his powers, I would be happy with that as a sequel. Because that's really the two main people that they would need for this movie anyhow, if they were going to continue with this series. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. Hopefully somebody can pick it up in the future. I would be happy with that. But anyhow, that's all I have to say for this film. Please like, share, and subscribe. And comment down below your thoughts on this film if you have seen it, if you haven't seen it. I highly recommend going to watch this film before you watch this review, unless you are just wanting to kind of know some more about the movie before you go watch it, just to get more of an advanced opinion on it, I guess. But don't let this review deter you. Actually, this review shouldn't deter you because I enjoyed the film. But yeah, please go watch this movie. And that's all I have to say for now. See you guys in the next one. Bye-bye for now.